welcome back to Dog Cinema Recaps, where horror is for life, not just for October. Today, we're going to be covering what I initially thought was one of the most forgotten films of all time, until I realised that this series has two prequels. They're basically the same film. They're so forgettable that they made them twice within 12 months of each other. So, in 1999, 15 years after Reagan McNeil's exorcism in 1975, Father Dyer and Lieutenant William F. Kinderman reminisce about Father Damien Karras. The following night, an incident at a church occurs indicating the presence of an evil supernatural entity, which causes a crucifix to open its eyes. The next scene then follows with the perspective of a man walking down the street speaking of a dream falling down a long flight of steps, suggesting that someone is committing murders linked to the Karras death. The next morning, Kinderman is called to find the body of Thomas Kinty, a black youth that has had his head replaced with a cut-off statue of Jesus. The fingerprints at the crime scenes do not match, indicating a different person was responsible for each murder. Kinderman reveals to the hospital staff that the murders, which will soon include Dyer, fit the modus operandi of James Vanneman, the Gemini Killer, a serial killer who was executed 15 years prior. Kinderman visits the head of psychiatric ward, Dr. Temple, who relates the history of one of his patients. The patient was found wandering aimlessly 15 years previously with amnesia. He was locked up, catatonic until he became violent and claimed to be the Gemini Killer. Kinderman sees that the patient is an old friend of Damien Karras. Karras' form appears to briefly change of that into the Gemini Killer. He expresses ignorance of Karras, but boasts of killing Father Dyer. That night, a nurse is murdered and Dr. Temple dies by suicide. Kinderman returns to see Karras, who once again changes into the Gemini Killer. The Gemini explains that he is being aided by a master, the same entity who had previously possessed Reagan. The master was furious about the exercise by Karras and is exacting his revenge by using Karras' body as a conduit for the Gemini to continue his killing spree. Each evening, the soul of the Gemini leaves the body of Karras and possesses the other patients elsewhere in the hospital, using them to commit murders. The Gemini also reveals to enforce Dr. Temple to bring Kinderman to him. The Gemini possesses an old woman and attempts to murder Kinderman and his family at their home, but the attack abruptly ends when Father Paul Morning arrives at the hospital and begins to perform an exorcism on Karras. The Master intervenes, taking over Karras' body, and Morning is severely mutilated. Kinderman rushes back to the hospital and attempts to euthanize Karras. The possessed Karras then torments and attempts to kill Kinderman. Morning manages to regain consciousness and tells Karras to fight. Karras regains his free will briefly and cries to Kinderman to shoot, killing Karras and freeing them both of Gemini and his master. Later, Kinderman watches Karras' funeral. Karras died, age 40, on 9th of October, 1975. Now, when I say something's underrated, The Exorcist III is ridiculously underrated. Is it as good as the original? No, it's not, but it's a damn fine film. It's a damn fine film. There's certain parts with like George C. Scott, Jason Miller, where a lot of it is just talking, and it's amazing. The acting on show is, honestly, it's incredible. Brad Dourif as well, when he takes over as the Gemini Killer, them scenes where they're just in a cell, effectively just yelling at each other, is honestly superb. I mean, usually when I do recaps, I've seen the film, I know the bits that I want, and I just kind of skip through and find them and put them together. This, I ended up watching, like, throughout, because just performances just got me. It just did. And Exorcist 3, yeah, Exorcist II Heretic was hot shit, and it truly was. The Exorcist 3 is a damn fine film.